Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you. Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months. That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel. It's Saturday night and this is the Saturday 5. I'm Darren Grimes, along with Albiam and Corner, Emily Carver, Benjamin Butterworth and Connor Tomlinson. Tonight on the show, Stern Suella, but it's all so we can be kind Samaritans.
Politicians, stop distracting us with cultural issues and focus on our priorities.
I don't mind a little bit of foul language in politics, do you?
And why there should be no ceasefire until Hamas is obliterated.
And pro-Palestinian protests taking place on Armistice Day disrespects the memory of the men who fought to keep Britain free.
It's 7 p.m. and this is the Saturday 5. Welcome to the Saturday 5. Now, I tell you what, you don't need to go and stand outside in the cold this bonfire night weekend. There's going to be plenty of fireworks right here. And as usual, I've got a couple of sparklers alongside me in the shape of Albie and Emily, plus the Guy Fawkes of the operation. It's the wokest man in Britain, Benjamin Butterworth. Also tonight, making his debut on the show, the writer and commentator, Connor Tomlinson. Does he know what he's let himself in for? We'll find out.
Now, the premise of the show is simple. Each of us gets around 60 seconds to outline our argument about our chosen topic. Then we all pile in and throw each other under the bus as if we were witnesses at the COVID inquiry. Now, please do get in touch with your views on all of our topics. Email us, gbviews@gbnews.com. And don't forget Flummox the 5 as well. That's the part of the show where we answer your questions on whatever topic you like. Life, the universe, Benjamin's clothing choices. Nothing is off limits. But before we start tearing each other apart, it is time for your Saturday Night News with Ray.
Good evening. Our top stories tonight. London's Charing Cross station has been forced to close due to a sit-in by hundreds of pro-Palestinian protesters. British Transport Police say they're responding with passengers able to exit the station only. Now, that comes after the Met Police arrested 11 people at a pro-Palestine protest in London earlier. They were taken into custody at Piccadilly Circus. One person was seen displaying a placard that police believed could incite hatred. Another was arrested on suspicion of breaching public order, and a third for assaulting a police officer. Details on the other arrests to follow. The Prime Minister says plans by some groups to protest during remembrance commemorations are provocative and disrespectful. In a statement, Rishi Sunak said the right to remember in peace and dignity must be protected. Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer echoed those comments. He says he supports the police in whatever action is needed. Israel Defence Forces released footage earlier of the military blowing up tunnels in Gaza and clearing an area of explosive devices. Now, that comes as UN officials warn that there is no place that is safe in the Strip as the conflict continues. Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has rejected calls from the US Secretary of State for a humanitarian pause until all hostages taken by Hamas are freed. Well, 112 UK nationals were on the list to leave Gaza through the Rafah crossing today. Earlier, Scotland's First Minister Humza Yousaf announced that his family has been able to leave through that crossing. Palestinian officials say more than 700 foreign nationals have crossed in the past 2 days, including dozens of critically injured people. Suella Braverman wants to restrict the use of tents by homeless people in towns and cities. She's warning that British streets risk going the same way as some in the US. Posting on X, the Home Secretary said many tents are occupied by people, quote, from abroad, living on the streets as a lifestyle choice, end quote. Reports say the crackdown would target tents that become a nuisance, such as those blocking shop doorways. Russell Brand is being sued by a film extra who claims that she was sexually assaulted on a US movie set. His accuser says the actor was carrying a bottle of vodka and appeared intoxicated when he approached her on the set of Arthur back in 2010. The lawsuit has been filed in New York and is the first accusation to be made against Brand in court. Brand has not yet responded to that lawsuit. This is GB News across the UK on TV, in your car, on digital radio and on your smart speaker by saying, play GB News. Now let's get back to the Saturday 5.
Welcome back. It's Saturday night. You're with the Saturday 5. I'm Emily Carver. So let's crack on with tonight's first discussion.
Yes, Benjamin's going to start tonight, and as the horrific violence in the Middle East continues, unleashed, of course, by the Hamas terrorist attacks on Israel October 7th, there are growing calls for a ceasefire in Gaza. Now, Benjamin, for this one, you're going to have to urge viewer discretion on this topic, I believe.
Yeah, that's right. This one really is deeply unpleasant, so if you want to turn away, you're entitled to. But this week, the Israeli embassy invited myself and journalists from other major outlets to go and view the raw footage from Hamas terrorists of their actions on the 7th of October. Footage that they live-streamed to their friends and allies to show off the murdering that they were committing. And it was truly the most horrific thing I've ever seen. There were clips of babies who had been killed in Mickey Mouse pyjamas, of people fleeing desperately in their cars being shot at, of 2 children, probably about 9 years old, shouting "Daddy" as an explosive is thrown at their father and then asking, "Why am I alive?" And there was another clip of a concrete room piled high with dead Jewish bodies. I couldn't help but think, if the Holocaust had cameras, this is what you would have seen. And then came one of the most shocking parts, a recording of a phone call of a Hamas terrorist shouting down the phone in glee to his father, "I killed 10 Jews, Dad. Your son is a hero. I'll show you on WhatsApp." Now, the Israeli embassy has let us use that recording for TV viewers, but I warn you, the glee with which he expresses satisfaction at what he did is deeply disturbing.
أنا قاعد أكلمك من جوا بصير افتح الواتس تبعه قول له وين شوف كيف قتله شوف كيف قتلك بيدي يابا ابنك قتل يهود قاعد أكلمك من جوال يهودية قتلتها وقتلت جوزها عطوا بيدي يابا عطوا بيدي قتلت.
It's horrifying. Now, 76% of people, according to a poll this week, want a ceasefire from Israel. They want them to put their weapons down and succumb to these Hamas terrorists. They do so from the comfort and security of their homes in Britain, where the only confrontation they have with this evil is the gruesome scenes that they see on their television news. But for 9 million Israelis and many Palestinian civilians, they are confronted with having the most barbaric, evil terrorist cult on their doorstep every day trying to kill them. So the truth about a ceasefire is that, as Keir Starmer said earlier this week, ceasefires only freeze conflicts where they are. They do nothing to resolve them. And where is Hamas 3 weeks, nearly 4 weeks, after one of the worst atrocities we've seen in recent times? Well, their leadership is still intact, their infrastructure within Gaza is still intact, and their funders are still flooding them with money from countries like Iran. If there were to be a ceasefire now, then they would claim victory. And this week, Hamas leadership said on television what they would do. They said, given the chance, those atrocities I described a moment ago, they would do them again and again and again. And so that's why we should not have a ceasefire, because that would let the terrorists win. And there's nothing moral or worthy about letting terrorists win. Now, I know this is a complicated and difficult issue, and everyone is horrified by what's been happening. And people with good morals are on the other side. Albie, how do you feel about this?
Look, I think it's a really tricky issue, and I'm certainly, I think I'm not wrong in saying, the most sympathetic to a ceasefire on the panel. And the reason that I'm quite sympathetic to a ceasefire is because I wonder, when has trying to eradicate terrorists from a particular territory and change regime ever actually resulted in there being less terrorism? If we look at the war on terror that the West embarked on after 9/11 in Iraq, that led to ISIS. If we look at what we did in Afghanistan, we've now withdrawn. The Taliban are still at large. I don't think we're any safer now than we were in 2001. And my concern with a continued war in the Middle East is that actually what will happen is that it will radicalise more people. It will be a recruitment exercise for Hamas, essentially, in the West Bank. And any of the terrorists which are killed today, their children, tomorrow will become the terrorists of tomorrow. And we need a solution now, which is why I think after the hostages are released, because the hostages have absolutely got to be released, there needs to be a ceasefire and negotiated settlement and a two-state solution back on the table.
I think the reality is that, you know, people who want a ceasefire are being naive to Hamas, if not honourable in their wishes overall. Who wants the war to carry on? Yeah. No one wants that. But Hamas have said they'll repeat what they did, and I think too many people don't recognise the brutality of what they wish to do. Emily, how do you feel about this?
I think a lot of people who aren't particularly invested in this conflict see the word ceasefire and think, of course I want that. That means peace. That means a stop to bloodshed. That means fewer civilians will die and fewer children will lose their lives. So it sounds great, and I think that's why that percentage is so high, 76% of Brits wanting a ceasefire. But I also think that a lot of people in this country and across the world are naive, as you say, to the intentions of Hamas. And they're there in black and white. Hamas wants to kill all Jews, and they want to start by eradicating Israel. And to do so, that takes huge amounts of violence, and we've seen only the beginning of it. And if Israel were to unilaterally put down their weapons, because Hamas isn't going to agree to some formal agreement of a ceasefire, they've said that they won't. So if Israel puts down their weapons and stops their defences, what we'll see is many thousands more Israelis die. And let's remember, this is the only Jewish state in the world, and to see this conflict play out in terms of protest in this country is deeply troubling, because for all of the people who are marching for lives of innocent people, there are unfortunately and quite clearly many, many extremists who do support Hamas in its intention to wipe out Israel.
Connor, what do you think? Why do you think that most people, especially younger people, your sort of generation being a bit younger than me, why do you think so many of them are inclined to a ceasefire rather than the rest of the argument?
I think I agree with Emily in that it is seen to be the compassionate position to call to put down arms. Also, they have been propagandised by a post-colonial theory to think that Muslim nation full of non-white people means that they are de facto better, and therefore we should be on their side. And despite all of the intersectional contradictions of Queers for Palestine, for example, being out with their signs when they would be persecuted in Palestine, they feel compelled to be out there. I wanted to pick up on two things that Albie said. I think it's slightly different from the war on terror in that there were enforcement costs and unfamiliar terrain that meant that you weren't fighting your neighbours. And also, a two-state solution is not particularly viable because Hamas is essentially operating as a terrorist state as is, with backing from Iran. If you formalise said state, you would still need a regime change so that you don't empower these terrorists.
I agree there needs to be regime change, but my concern is I don't know how a prolonged war in the Middle East is going to get us to a two-state solution any quicker. I think it's actually going to slow down things.
I think the only viable alternative to a prolonged war would be a three-state solution where you pressure Egypt and Jordan to step in and control the territory. But of course, they don't really want to do that with the Palestinian people right now because they've said they're not taking any of the refugees. So we need some sort of international pressure to get those countries to step up and get involved as well, because otherwise Israel's just on its own in the region.
All right, now, hopefully you've not had enough of Conor from that sentence, because up next, making his debut, is Conor Tomlinson, and he's going to discuss the planned pro-Palestinian protests scheduled for Armistice Day next Saturday, November even, the 11th. Away you go, Conor.
Yeah, so the Prime Minister has ruled out banning the pro-Palestinian protests that are scheduled to happen on the 11th of November on Armistice Day. Now, this has proven to be quite an unpopular policy, actually, because the People's Polling Company put out a poll that said 43% of Britons polled wanted the protests banned. And another third thought that if the protests went ahead, the Met Police were unequipped to stop the protests from escalating into violence. Now, why such a lack of faith in the police in our country? Well, as we've seen in various videos floating around on Twitter from prior protests in the week, they've been holding and handing back the possessions of protesters illegally scaling scaffolding. They haven't stopped them from defacing Nelson's column, but they did decide to go and arrest a man who complained about Palestinian flags being flown in Bethnal Green High Street. And the reason is, they recognise that this is a volatile constituency who have supported the actions of the terrorists since the initial massacre on October the 7th. And they think by telling the British public not to antagonise them by waving English flags, they will be able to stop the tension. It's kind of like telling a battered wife, don't burn the dinner next time if you don't want to get smacked. Multiculturalism has led us to this situation. Mass immigration has led us to this situation. And more woolly liberalism that thinks we can just talk this situation out will not lead us out of it. Tolerance is not a neutral value. It is a liability if the other side doesn't reciprocate. If they declare their intention to flip over the game board, why should they be protected by the rules of the game? We already have it with embarrassing situations where the police have had to delete tweets of flags being flown, have prior been flown by the Taliban, and have told us jihad actually has many meanings, engaging in Islamic theology when a proscribed terrorist group stands on the corner declaring that Muslim armies should annex England to a global caliphate. Now, I don't personally have any allegiances to Israel more than I do any other country like Iceland. I just don't want my home city every weekend turned into a no-go zone by people that fundamentally hate the English way of life. They don't believe in free speech, so why should we extend it to them? I think it would be an absolute act of disrespect to the glorious dead, the men who fought to keep our country safe in 2 world wars, if we allowed a terrorist-supporting protest to happen on their day of memorial. Ban it.
Yeah, well, Albie, do you disagree?
Yes, I do disagree, actually, Conor. You and I often have conversations about freedom of speech and how important it is in a liberal democracy. And I think that means that we can't be going around banning protests on the nationally important days, granted, but because they're inconvenient. And we've got to remember that a lot of the people on these protests, they simply want a ceasefire, like 76% of the British public, as Benjamin was telling us earlier on. So I think it would be totally wrong and a betrayal of our British liberal democratic principles to be going around banning protests on inconvenient days. Imagine what could happen if a government had that power and we didn't agree with the government.
They already do. They did it with COVID. So what we're seeing here is the ability to...
But you didn't like that, did you?
No, I know. And this is why tolerance is not a neutral value. We either stand for our own personal values, like freedom, likes free speech, or we cave to a mob that want to confiscate those. They've already said that they
But ceasefire protesters don't want to confiscate our freedom.
These protests started after the initial massacre. So what they're doing is they're capitalising on a bunch of students who don't understand that a ceasefire means the death of Jews to drum up popular support.
You're saying that 76% of Brits don't know what they're talking about.
We also know that from the security services and from counter-terrorism that Iran is having quite an influence on some of these protests. I don't know exactly in what ways, presumably in terms of social media output and in terms of drumming up support from particular leaders from various communities. But these aren't... There are, of course, Albie, many people who are on these marches who just want peace. Of course there are. But I think it is extremely disrespectful for people to march concerning a foreign conflict, which is so controversial and also puts so much... Well, it scares Jewish communities in this country massively, and I don't think we can overstate that, to be honest. I've spoken to a lot of Jewish people in the last couple of weeks, and they are very fearful. They're making plans in their heads of where they could possibly move to if things get too tough here, which I think is an absolute travesty. Yeah. And it's something, if I think about too much, I will start to cry about, because it is horrible. This country gave refuge to Jewish people, and we have a history of it. So I find it absolutely astonishing that people in this country would consider it even an option to have this kind of protest.
I find this a difficult one because, on the one hand, I want to say that I really dislike the idea of a protest being banned because I think our democracy ought to be strong enough to take these tests. And I think, in many ways, it certainly is. But I often make the case about hate speech and why I think there should be such laws as hate speech laws, because if your speech has a consequence that means that it stops someone else's ability to go about their normal day-to-day lives and just be themselves, then I think that's a reasonable bar to draw legally. And I would suggest, in some ways echoing what Emily just described, that if there is a motivation to do these protests in a way that has a provocation, because it's Armistice Day, that has a provocation to affect Jews feeling safe in their home city or wherever it may be in this country, then I think that probably is where it crosses the line. And of course, I would suggest that if that's not the case, then given that Armistice Day falls on a Saturday, why don't they do it on the Sunday or the following week? That might be a far more amicable conclusion.
I would say to people who are in favour of a ceasefire, don't protest on that day because it's not going to win you any favours with the people that you're trying to convince that you are right. But at the same time...
I don't think, by the way, they're trying to convince anyone they're right. They're just trying to feel righteous.
I hope they're trying to win the argument. They're not going to win the argument by protesting on Armistice Day. But I will just say something very quickly about a protest I went to the week after the Black Lives Matter protests. There was a White Lives Matter protest. So I went just to go and see what it was going to be like. And it was the most terrifying experience of my life to see all these racists gathering in central London. I don't think that should have been banned. So if I don't think that should have been banned, I'm perfectly consistent to say I don't think this should be banned either. It's better that this stuff is out in the daylight so we can tackle it.
Were they declaring intent ahead of time to violently overthrow the culture of the country? Because we've already seen that happen at multiple prior protests. They've already had to make arrests about that. And, again, this came off the back of an act of aggression by a terrorist group. So that is the ethos that is underlying.
But they're not protesting in support of Hamas. They're protesting in support of freeing Palestine and for a peace.
But not from Hamas. They aren't protesting on support of freeing Palestine from Hamas. They're saying ending the Jewish occupation there. They're not necessarily against Hamas, and that is a serious problem.
I think the majority of the protesters who are out there are not supporting Hamas. They are simply supporting what we all want, a two-state solution, and for this awful debacle to be over.
I don't think they all want that, though. I think, unfortunately, you and your good nature are giving too much goodwill to the people that are chanting from the river to the sea, implying the eradication of the Jewish state, which is in the Hamas Charter.
And, of course, there are some people who are chanting that phrase who haven't the foggiest what it actually means. So you've got a mixture of people on these marches with all sorts of different intentions. But still to come tonight, Albie will tackle the culture wars, and I'll ask, in the wake of the COVID inquiry, insulting colleagues, is it ever acceptable in the workplace? And we'll see if that Pratt Benjamin agrees with me or not. Sorry, Benjamin. Ooh. But coming up next, cuddly Home Secretary Suella Braverman has announced her latest Bleeding Hearts policy, restricting the use of tents used by homeless people. Darren will have his say on that. You're with the Saturday 5, live on GB News.
We're here for the show.
More energy this time!
Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie, second best. You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like? I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these three.
Oh! No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays at 9 on GBNews.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's at Drive Time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News,
the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to the Saturday 5. Cheers for your company and cheers for your emails about tonight's topics. There's a lot of praise for Benjamin. Can you believe? James says, brilliant, Benjamin, cutting through to the important fact that a ceasefire means an Israeli surrender to terrorism, delivered with passion, commitment and intelligence.
Intelligence?
Yeah.
Well, there you go.
You don't normally get that.
No.
Jack has written in and she says, Benjamin, I can't believe I'm saying this, but wow, I am actually impressed. This is the most logical, moral, grown-up thing I think I've heard you say to date. Maybe there is more to you than the look of a broken clock after all. Well said, Jackie.
Thanks, sort of.
And Sam says, an excellent debut from Connor, a soon-to-be regular, I hope. Connor's posted his £5 in the post.
Right, now, Darren is going to give his verdict on Suella Braverman's plan to restrict the use of tents by homeless people. Darren, has the Home Secretary gone ever so slightly too far this time, surely?
Oh, give over, Emily, give over. I want to take you all for a stroll right now through Trafalgar Square. Forget the lions, the fountains and the monument to the man himself. Imagine it being more like the end of Glastonbury without the poshos. A scene out of San Francisco, as Michael Schellenberger, a bloke who's seen the light, would say. His once glorious city, now a gallery of Democrat decay, is a testament to those forward-thinking policies that sought to Defund the police. That worked out well, didn't it? Have a gander at these. And for our radio listeners, just imagine a liberal hellhole. Lawless in every way possible. Now, chew on this nugget. By the year's end, we might have over 50,000 foreign nationals playing musical chairs for a place to call home. Now, why is that? It's because, of course, our housing market is more squeezed than a hipster's skinny jeans, and our migration policy leakier than a sieve. Now, Suella Braverman's pitching a tent ban to avoid us ending up with scenes like that in San Francisco, and the bleeding hearts are up in arms. But hold your horses, I say, because it's not the iron fist that they're painting it to be. It's savvy policy with a bit of backbone. This isn't about sprucing up the high street. It's a crusade against making rough sleeping as common as pigeons in a park. Good-hearted charities doling out these tents with a smile are, I'm afraid to say, bless their souls, turning our city centres into 24/7 campgrounds. Braverman's not looking to give anyone the cold shoulder. With the Vagrancy Act out, there's £500 million being pumped into the economy to bid farewell to rough sleeping. That's a good thing. What we're talking about here is pushing for proper digs, shelters, real bricks and mortar, houses, not just a canvas roof. This is about raising the bar for public spaces and making sure help isn't just a plaster on a wooden leg. So let's cut through the malarkey. This isn't a war on the down and out. It's about putting the pride back into our pavements and giving the homeless a leg to stand tall. Surely, with that, we need carrot and a bit of stick, frankly. And that's what's on the table right now. Sometimes, folks, you've got to play the stern parent to be the good Samaritan. Now, Conor Tomlinson, do you think that she's a heartless so-and-so?
No, I think it's perfectly sensible. I'm really glad you referenced San Francisco, because all across America, very permissive rough sleeping policies have led areas to, even like Skid Row in California, the bubonic plague is back there because of the lack of hygiene. And so not only do we need, as you raised quite rightly, to crack down on mass migration, to make sure there are the funds and places available to house these people as they need to get off the streets, but also we need a less permissive addiction policy. Up in Scotland, they're doing what the UN has advised and what has been going on in Democrat cities, a clean needle programme for new heroin addicts to reduce the harm of taking it. No, we should get them off the heroin, get them to go cold turkey, support them through it, and then allow them to reincorporate themselves to be functioning members of society. It doesn't do these broken people a favour to let them sleep on the street and stay addicted to these substances.
And Benjamin Butterworth, this is where I'm afraid you're going to lose our viewers, because the kind of lawless hellhole that I mentioned in those pictures there, that's exactly your idea of utopia. That's what your policies would lead to.
Actually, I think you underestimate our viewers. I suspect a lot of decent people will be appalled by the idea of someone that's gone into politics to take tents off the poorest and most vulnerable people. The fact is that, you know, anyone that's been to America, let alone seen some of the images we saw, knows that they have an enormous problem with homelessness. And there are great swathes. I remember when I was in DC, swathes of it covered in tents. They're not in those tents because of a policy about the roof over their head in the street. They're in those tents because they have problems with acute poverty and with addiction and with mental health services that are even worse in the US than they are here. And the idea that simply taking the tent away does anything to resolve the problem is a nonsense.
So why does the mayor of San Francisco want to do exactly the same thing then?
In 2010...
Yeah, I didn't think there would be an answer.
No, the answer to it is to have more outreach of mental health and addiction services and to have more hostel spaces to take these people in.
So why are they all addicted to drugs? It's the kind of liberal left policies pushed by people like you that has led to this horrible chaos.
Let me finish answering this, because, you know, as the child of 2 heroin addicts, which I've written about before, I know that good people can get hooked and their life is ruined and they can't get back from it. To try and kick them when they're literally down in the street, I think is repugnant. And maybe Suella Braverman should do more to look at the fact that in 2010 there were 20,000 homeless in this country, registered homeless, and today there are more than 70,000.
And what's mass migration been since then?
Well, do you know what? If you have a question, as you referenced, about migration, that is a question with border policy. Once they're here, you have a responsibility as a human being. You call yourself a Christian, then you should love thy neighbour no matter where they're from.
Here we go. Suella Braverman has put this out in a pretty awful way, I think. Focusing on the tents, OK, fine, none of us want tents on our high streets with people living in them. Of course we don't. And it's linked to crime and, of course, drug misuse and all of that stuff that no one wants on their high street. But you've got to focus on how to get people out of those tents rather than just taking away the tents. We've got an acute housing crisis in this country, and I've watched documentary after documentary of young families, single parents, people whose rent has risen double, who are essentially just out on their bottoms, nowhere to go, because we've allowed this housing crisis to get so acute that people simply can't afford to put a roof over their heads. And it's not just drug addicts, it's not just people who are lazy and can't get a job, it's not just hopeless people, it's normal people who've never been in this situation before. And I do think that the reason why we have a housing crisis is, A, because of planning, but also, as you say, because of migration. The government has not planned for the population that we currently have. And it is appalling that people who have lived in homes their entire lives are now on our streets, and that is the reality.
Albie, surely you don't want to see us become like those images of San Francisco, where we do have rows and rows of tents.
I don't think we will. A, because fentanyl's not a problem in this country, and that is one of the leading causes of homelessness when we're talking about San Francisco. So the comparison with America is actually just very stupid, and I don't know why Suella Braverman made it. But what I actually want to see, rather than just saying, oh, we don't like homeless people, how are we actually going to solve this?
So you think Sadiq Khan has done a good job in London?
I don't think Sadiq Khan has done a good job. I don't think.
So how are we not going the way of San Francisco?
I don't think the Conservatives have done a good job. We've not done a good enough job in this country with our housing policy, with our migration policy, with our mental health policy, with our drug policies. If we want to solve these problems, we've actually got to solve them, not just talk about them. All Suella Braverman is doing is saying, I don't like homeless people, I don't like these tents in Trafalgar Square, let's get rid of them, without actually proposing any workable solutions, which is what Emily and Benjamin have been talking about.
Well, I do actually think that there is a point to be made there in saying that actually our capital city shouldn't be made to look like that. There is
so
a
where
pride.
will these people go, Darren?
Well, do you know, these people can... There are other alternatives. The councils are offering certain people who say they don't want to because they quite like to avoid being put into the system. There are people getting up to no good, potentially that have arrived here illegally and all the rest of it, who want the system to be away from them, kept away from them. And I think actually to try and diminish that point and say that Suella Braverman's on a hiding to nothing and just hates homeless people is frankly absurd.
That's basically what
I think as a member of the Conservative Party to say that, I think they ought to be ashamed of having you on their group. Anyway, we're going to have to leave it there because still ahead, Emily's going to be asking whether or not bad language towards work colleagues is ever acceptable. There are a few choice words about to be bandied about here. No idea why she might want to tackle that one. But next, a poll suggests that the public think politicians exaggerate the culture wars as a tactic. Are they right? Albie's going to give his verdict. You're with the Saturday 5 live on GB News.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. Join me, Mark Dolan, Fridays and Saturdays from 9, Sundays from 10. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
There's only 3 people you can trust in life. Your doctor, your lawyer, and your nana.
I'm not sure.
So join me, Nana Aquare, at 3 p.m. every Saturday and Sunday, where we discuss the biggest topics of the weekend. Be ready for battle. Could you be quiet? What is this?
It's my new t-shirt.
It's your new t-shirt. I don't bite. Well, not without a good reason. Always honest, always fun. Every weekend at 3 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes & Co, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Who is it? We're here for the show.
More energy this time!
Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie.
Second best.
You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like? I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these 3.
Oh! No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays at 9 on GB News.
Good evening and welcome back to the Saturday 5. Now, we've got plenty of emails coming in tonight, lots actually. Bob says, what circumstances have conspired to make a person live on the street? Have various government decisions and inability ultimately been responsible? Well, I'm sure some will be personal issues, but a lot may have to do with government choices. Duncan says, I'm sure they'd like a hotel, but they don't qualify for some reason. They do not choose to be homeless. I think he might be referring to the number of migrants who are in hotels at the moment. Wesley says, hi, Saturday 5 people, checking in from Georgia, USA. Woohoo! I agree with Darren Grimes. The UK Home Secretary, Suella Braverman, is definitely in the right, cracking down on tents in the streets. So there we go. But now it's time for our next debate.
Yes, up next it's Albie, and Albie's going to talk about a poll which suggests that the public think politicians exaggerate the culture wars as a tactic to deflect from their own failings. Albie, I assume you agree with the public on this one?
The public, as ever, Darren, are absolutely right. Polling from King's College London's Policy Institute earlier on this week found that 62% of the great British public, that's you at home, think that politicians exaggerate the culture war to distract from other issues. Can I just say, well done to everyone that thinks that? Because I've been thinking it too for quite some time. Politicians have been concocting, stoking the culture war to distract us from where their failings are happening. If we look at our economy, it's flatlining. Inflation is running hot. Taxes are at a 70-year high. Net migration is the highest it's ever been. But the politicians want us to argue about whether a trans woman can be a woman. Now, look, don't get me wrong. I would love it if politicians could simply ask the question, what is a woman, by saying adult, human, female. But the idea that this is one of the biggest issues facing the country is simply wrong. The idea that debates about institutional racism and net zero are going to decide the outcome about the next general election are totally wrong. The issues facing the country are the economy, migration, the NHS. And the simple fact of the matter is, if my party, the Conservative Party, isn't able to demonstrate that things are better today than they were in December 2019, we're going to be ushering Keir Starmer into number 10. Rishi, it's time to get bold. No, not as bold as Liz Truss, but it's still time to get bold. And I'm not sure the 5 pledges are going well enough for us to use them as a platform for the next general election. We need to be getting bold on things like housing, reforming the NHS, enlarging the size of the NHS, the defence budget, cutting the NHS waiting list, and also getting all those people who are on welfare benefits, all 5 million of them, back into work and cutting migration. We need to get back to basics, stop distracting us with the culture war and get on with delivering the people's priorities. Dan Grimes, you're a bit of a culture warrior, aren't you? Do you think you are one of these people who's been distracting us from the real issues going on in society?
Well, I just think it's naive in the extreme. The idea that a young person who vehemently cares about all of these things, which are, let's be honest, there is a left-wing media in this country, established media sliding to the left, like that man there, who want us to actually denigrate and destroy much that this country has stood for time, a long, very long time now. We were talking earlier about the cenotaph and the attempted desecration of that. We saw Connor talking about actually the fact that they've got a barrier around the cenotaph. All of these things we saw during the BLM, of course, the riots out there where the cenotaph itself was attacked. Someone tried to light the Union Jack on fire. You try telling a woman in a prison, for example, that she is focusing on the wrong priorities when she says that a person with a penis has been brought into her prison because they self-identify.
But Darren, don't you think the bigger issue for the women in the prison would be that there aren't enough prison places and that they're having 2 or 3 people in a cell which is built for one? And surely that's the bigger issue for that woman in the prison.
Until you change the culture, you cannot focus on the economy. Until you tackle the fact that people out there disagree with everything that you as a Conservative stand for, you ain't going to get anywhere.
Well, do you know what? Can I just say, Darren, you've illustrated what a fool you are on this in a nutshell. At a time when prison leaders are warning that people are escaping prisons, and we had one example of that. They just wandered out of Wandsworth prison. Meanwhile, you're going on about the hypothetical, in some cases, ideas that a trans person might go in a women's prison. There's been only a handful of examples of that happening of any description.
That's all right, then.
So you're more bothered about resource going on that than actual prisoners sodding off out of the prison.
Yes, Emily, what are your thoughts on this topic?
May I come in on this? Because I would agree with you insofar as I think every political party tries to capitalise on culture wars because it's a discussion, it's a current discussion that's going on. But I don't think it's fair to say that the government has stoked these culture wars intentionally from the start. It is left-wing protest groups that have done that, ranging from Black Lives Matter to Just Stop Oil to organisations such as Mermaids and Stonewall. All of these organisations have stoked that culture war. So I don't think it's... And I think it is the Conservative Party who should be standing against that. I don't necessarily think it's some big distraction technique, although they might try and mobilise some support through it.
But Connor Tomlinson and also Emily, don't you think that the culture war is being fought from both sides? This idea that it's just left-wingers like Benjamin stoking up the culture war, I've never actually agreed with. You see both the woke movement and the anti-woke movement stoking up disagreements as much as each other, don't we?
Sure, there are grifters in both camps, but I don't think that means we marginalise the issues. For example, concerned parents who, until about 10 minutes ago, weren't even aware of this issue until suddenly their daughter falls prey to trans ideology online and decides to go and get her breasts removed. I've known people that this has happened to. This is why it's quite a personal issue for me. I've spoken to some of these people. They've had their abilities to have normal families and normal lives bereaved from them because while we were all looking one way, only focusing on the economy at the end of history, the medical establishment was captured by an ideology and was taking the lives from these people. So I think fundamentally I understand that you as a Conservative want to stand on a winning platform because you're concerned about economic downturn that could deliver a defeat.
But Connor, it's not just me, it's 62% of the public think that politicians are using the culture wars to distract from issues. And don't you think parents are more concerned about whether or not their child can get a doctor's appointment or if their school's falling down rather than this gender ideology that you speak of?
Not until it actually affects them. And part of the problem is, I think people are disaffected with the culture war because they would actually care about the issues if it was brought in front of them. They just don't think the politicians are going to do anything. I don't care if a politician turns around and goes, and I know what a woman is, won't you clap for me? Great. Where have you been for the last decade when this has been permeating every single institution? I don't believe you're going to be effective.
May I just say one thing, because I'm not sure it was caught on camera. Benjamin was shaking his head and frowning when you were discussing
anyone would think
children coming to harm from transitioning. But, Benjamin, you must have seen the numerous interviews that have been done from adults now who transitioned as a child and they regret it. Surely this is something that does need to be discussed rather than just say, oh, it's just a couple, it's just a handful. Well, these things are growing in momentum.
First of all, Connor talks about people being aware of the existence of transgender people like it's some kind of cult, like Al-Qaeda has taken over the NHS. You talk about it with that level of paranoia and fear, which I think is utterly misplaced. The people I worry about, and the trans people that you hear from, but maybe some choose to ignore, is those who have known for their whole lives that they are not the person they appear to be physically, and they have had their self-confidence, their dignity, their ability to be the person they were born to be stolen from them because institutions and social attitudes were so deeply transphobic, maybe they even weren't able to recognise it. Those are the people that we should be concerned about. And I think that when you act with that paranoia, you deny them the agency to be themselves.
You must concede that there have been many cases of particularly girls as well who have gone down the route of transition and they had autism or had other mental health issues and then they come on to regret it. It is there, it's documented, and if you don't believe those people, then, you know, that's not to say, you know, anyway, right, still ahead. Lots more to say on that, but we could discuss that for the rest of the show, really. But still ahead, it's just my topic left. And as the COVID inquiry reveals some quite unsavoury language, I'll ask, is it OK to openly slag off all of your colleagues? And when you work with a bunch of clowns like this four, who can blame me, really? You're with the Saturday 5 live on GB News.
Who is it? We're here for the show.
More energy this time!
Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie.
Second best.
You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like? I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these three.
Oh! No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays at 9 on GB News.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you. Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months. That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
Delicious.
mental?
Put your mouth. OK. Here comes a train. Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa!
Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. Join me, Mark Dolan, Fridays and Saturdays from 9, Sundays from 10. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good evening, welcome back to the Saturday 5. Thanks for your emails too. I've just got time for one. Naomi says, Albie's got it right, but the public are also to blame. They're not interested in boring things like the economy. Well, there you go.
Got to make them interested.
Got to make them interested. That's the job.
Right, up next, it's Emily, and she's going to try and make them interested as well when she tells us whether she thinks Boris Johnson's former advisor, Dominic Cummings, was justified in calling ministers, and I quote, morons and bleep pigs. Away you go, Emily.
You're live on GB News. Please do not swear. But elsewhere this week, we did hear some rather fruity language, didn't we? Let's treat ourselves to a little reminder of the moment Hugo Keith KC read out some of Dominic Cummings' spicier pandemic WhatsApp messages.
You called ministers useless pigs, morons, in emails and WhatsApps to your professional colleagues. Do you think you contributed to a lack of effectiveness on the part of ministers and of the cabinet?
No, I think I was reflecting a widespread view.
I'm not too bothered by that language. Are you at home? On a scale of 1 to 10, how disturbed or perturbed are you by that? I suspect not a lot of you are. So let's remember, at the time, the government was in a state of emergency, high-stakes crisis. No one knew the extent of the virus. Life and death decisions were being made every day. The government was taking a battering every day too in the media. The death toll was being pumped into our living rooms every night. Against this backdrop, I suspect a bit of fruity language was the very least of our problems. So I'm going to throw this to the panel tonight, to the Saturday Five. Albie, what do you reckon? Bit of fruity language from Dominic Cummings, but surely the inquiry, what they should be focusing on is whether lockdown was worth it.
Well, exactly. I think my worry about this whole inquiry is it's now become the latest whip with which we should lash Boris Johnson with, rather than actually looking at the things which are going to stop us making the awful mistakes that we made during the pandemic. I just think it's turned into a complete rubbish show, for lack of a better word.
Yeah, Connor, I wonder what you think about this, because to me it seems that once again, yet again, the media are more concerned with the tittle-tattle, the superficial, the mudslinging, the personalities, rather than getting to the crux of the matter.
Yeah, it's a giant distraction because we're not evaluating whether or not lockdown caused immense amount of harms, whether it was economically worth it, whether or not it saved an immense amount of lives. I mean, the Johns Hopkins University meta-analysis already said that it only saved 1,700 compared to all the extra cancer deaths and deaths from despair.
It's a bit like a culture war.
Well, yeah, sort of. It's a bit of a personality mudslinging match, but something they didn't go into in whether or not the government was doing its job and in how it was talking to people and colleagues. James Rubin, the scientist that was part of Independent Sage, was at the panel and he said, we didn't try and scare anyone. And well, as Laura Dodsworth documented in her book before, kind of contradicts the 2020 Sage Minute Notes where they said that we were trying to elevate people's level of perceived risk because they weren't complying with lockdown laws. There's no scrutiny of whether or not...
I think Emily's going to swear at you in a minute.
Well, there's no scrutiny.
Well, I'm just hoping everyone at home is keeping up with you, Connor, there, because you were throwing out different reports, different statistics, but it's good stuff. Benjamin, would you slag off your colleagues in a WhatsApp?
Well, do you know, I was going to say that you shouldn't swear about your colleagues, but then I remembered that Boris Johnson is now one of our colleagues, so maybe I've changed my mind. Do you know what? I do think that obviously things get tense, especially, you know, if you're running a business and you're trying to make ends meet, let alone running the country in a crisis. But I think you shouldn't use that language about your colleagues, because ultimately you have to build a relationship, you have to work with them, you have to get solutions. And is having that attitude in which you describe them in such, you know, aggressive way, is that really inducive to getting
But surely you'd agree with Dominic Cummings. I mean, look at the Boris Johnson's cabinet. Do you think that they were up to scratch?
I'm terrified to say anything. Instead, I quote what they actually said. Look, I might disagree that they're a bit useless, or, you know, worse than a bit useless, maybe a bit unethical at times. But I just think if, you know, I can talk about them like that. You know, Matt Hancock, thank God, isn't my colleague. But if you're in a close environment working with people, I think you have to act with a certain level of respect that says you can't call them effing and jeffing.
Darren, do you think these WhatsApp messages should have even been a focus point of the inquiry? It was rather bizarre to see Hugo Keith KC reading out this coarse language and then using it to, I don't know, show evidence of some kind of culture.
I just can't understand what relevance they are to the inquiry, as in the fruity language used. How on earth... in fact, Emily, what I would say is I don't think this government has been as effective than since he was in charge. When Dominic Cummings was in number 10, at least things got done. Benjamin Butterworth might not agree with what was being done, but at least the country was getting things done. So I personally can't stand this HRification of absolutely everything, where they go through WhatsApps with a fine-toothed comb looking for nasty words, hurty words that we can all twist about in the papers. Get a grip. The country was going through this virus that was ripping apart the country.
Also, those people are not going to be in government again, most likely. So surely the learnings about the personalities and the language that Dominic Cummings used is pretty irrelevant, right?
No, I mean, I do think it's pretty irrelevant. I don't really mind so much. I was much more concerned about Helen McNamara saying that there was a macho cult.
And she had the karaoke machine. That's all though for our first hour tonight, but plenty more to come, including 5 great topics in Flummox the 5 as well, all coming up. Get your questions in. You're watching the Saturday 5 live on GB News.
Who is it? We're here for the show.
More energy this time!
Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie.
Second best.
You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these three.
Ah!
No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays at 9 on GB News.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app, and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's Saturday night and this is the Saturday 5. I'm Darren Grimes, along with Albie Amoncona, Emily Carver, Benjamin Butterworth and Connor Tomlinson. Loads more to come tonight, including the Bunch of 5, where we'll take 5 big topics from the week and give you our verdict. This week we'll be asking if fireworks should be banned and hailing the rescue of the world's loneliest sheep. It's 8 p.m. and this is the Saturday 5. Also to come this hour, do asexual people need more rights? Or is this another group searching for victimhood? We'll be giving you our verdict as well on the Christmas advert from Marks and Spencer. It's made me all Scrooge.
And of course, we want to know your views as well. Please do get in touch. Email gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them coming in. And of course, do not forget Flummox the 5. You can ask us absolutely anything.
Anything.
Anything. And we'll answer it at the end of the show. Unscripted, unprepared, and usually unintelligible. But before all of that, it is your Saturday Night News with Ray Addison.
Thanks, team. Good evening. Our top stories this hour. The Met Police has issued a dispersal order after fireworks were fired into crowds and towards police officers in Trafalgar Square following a pro-Palestine protest. The force says 11 people have been arrested as a result of those protests so far. One person was seen displaying a placard that police believed could incite hatred. Another was arrested on suspicion of breaching public order, and a third for assaulting a police officer. Meanwhile, London's Charing Cross station has reopened after being forced to temporarily close due to a sit-in by hundreds of protesters. The Prime Minister says plans by some groups to protest during Remembrance commemorations are provocative and disrespectful. In a statement, Rishi Sunak said the right to remember in peace and dignity must be protected. Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer echoed those comments, saying he supports the police in whatever action is needed. The Foreign Office says it's pressing for the Rafah crossing to be reopened after it was temporarily closed today. In a statement, a spokesman described the situation as disappointing and said they remain in contact with British nationals in the region. 112 UK nationals were on the list to leave Gaza through the crossing today. It's not yet known how many were able to make that journey. Earlier, Scotland's First Minister Humza Yousaf announced that his family has now been able to leave Gaza. Israel Defense Forces released footage earlier of the military blowing up tunnels in Gaza and clearing an area of explosive devices. It comes as UN officials warn there's no place that is safe in the Strip as the conflict continues. Israel's PM, Benjamin Netanyahu, has rejected calls from the US Secretary of State for a humanitarian pause until all hostages taken by Hamas are freed. Well, as we've been hearing, Suella Braverman wants to restrict the use of tents by homeless people in towns and cities, warning that British streets risk going the same way as some in the United States. Posting on X, the Home Secretary said many tents are occupied by people, quote, from abroad, living on the streets as a lifestyle choice, end quote. Reports say the crackdown would target tents that become a nuisance, such as those blocking shop doorways. Russell Brand is being sued by a film extra who claims she was sexually assaulted on a US movie set. His accuser says the actor was carrying a bottle of vodka and appeared intoxicated when he approached her on the set of Arthur in 2010. The lawsuit has been filed in New York and is the first accusation to be made against Brand in court. Brand has not yet responded to that lawsuit. This is GB News across the UK on TV, in your car on digital radio and on your smart speaker by saying, play GB News. Now let's get back to the Saturday 5.
Thank you, Ray. It's Saturday night and you're with the Saturday 5. I'm Emily Carver. We're going to start with Bunch of 5, where we discuss 5 big stories which have caught our eyes this week you may have missed. Darren, what are we starting with tonight?
Well, Emily, we're starting with the one and only Stephen Fry, who has been describing his substance issues with John Cleese in his brilliant new show, the Dinosaur Hour is what it's called. It's on tomorrow, so do watch. And Fry has claimed that childhood sweets were a gateway to his cocaine addiction. He cited an addictive impulse that developed from the sugary treats. Now, I tell you, as a child, I had a penchant for certain sweets, I mean, even now, but I haven't, as a consequence, developed a desire for the Colombian marching powder. Albie, did you have a sweet tooth?
No, I didn't actually have that much of a sweet tooth. I've always been the kind of man that has a starter or 2 starters instead of dessert with dinner, so I'm much more of a savoury
have
man.
you, darling?
But yes, of course we have, sweetheart. But what I would say to Stephen Fry is that I think there's a likelihood that, I think if you're addicted to sugar as a child, it brings out these addictive traits, so you might be more likely to become addicted to another addictive substance when you're older, in Stephen's case, cocaine.
The only thing that I worry about here, because it may well be true that it triggers some kind of addictive personality, and if you're addicted to sweets or anything really, then you may go on to the drugs. And I know when people give up drugs, they may turn to the sweets. For that very reason. But I do worry that the public health lobby will jump on what Stephen Fry has said then talk about how we should ban sweets and put more warnings on sweets. And let's remember, most people can enjoy a sweet or two in moderation.
Benjamin, you're partial.
Do you know what? I think if sweets trigger something like this, then you've clearly got quite a fundamental problem. Because who never has sweets, right? That's an extremely normal thing. You never. Well, you're not normal. We've learned that in the last hour. But what I'd say is that, you know, Stephen Fry has spoken with great eloquence about his mental health struggles. He has bipolar, which causes the most acute mood swings, you know, that people have. And I suspect that those kind of troubled traits that he has to manage and medicate are probably have something to do with him falling foul of addiction to other things, you know, because, you know, often people with mental health problems, you know, it goes on to those kind of consequences. And so I think it would be a mistake to cut those out of the description of how he developed those problems.
So, Connor, do we all need to live like you and cut out the sugar?
I think it's
and
quite
only eat
wise,
meat.
And just eat meat, yes.
Hey, look, it's been very helpful for me. I just couldn't process sugar and I felt terrible. And I think we do have an obesity crisis, particularly childhood obesity crisis in this country. And even though there is a public health lobby pushing to regulate what is in our food, there is equally, and has been for many years, a powerful agriculture and food lobby that's been lobbying the government, particularly in America, where this is a real issue, to put high fructose corn syrup and things like that in their food, to pump it full of things which aren't nutritious, but drive up the calories and make people fat. So I think it's fair to say that there are people actually that might get addicted to sugar and it might click the hair trigger in them that might make them addicted to other substances. I think it's pretty cruel that we're setting this as the de facto diet for kids.
Well, should we move on? Because tonight there'll be a firework display. Well, across the country there will be very many firework displays, with many gathered for an evening of family fun. But according to a recent survey, only 14% of us will even attend one. And to top this off, almost 80% of us want fireworks banned altogether. 80% of us, 4 in 5, 8 in 10 of us want them banned. Connor, back to you. Have we become a nation of absolute killjoys?
I do think there is an element of curtain twitching in this. Now, I'm not a big fan of fireworks. I am going to a display, but it's only to help a bro out because he used to go with his girlfriend every year and now he's just got me instead. Poor guy. And yet I get people don't like that when their dogs are petrified by it. It's not good. I've had it before. But we do have to grow up a little bit at this point. If we're being so inconvenienced by loud noises that we ask the government to step in, I think society's got a little bit too safe and mollycoddled. I don't think they need to be banned.
Benjamin, I was talking to a representative for veterans, a veteran charity, and they were saying that they want more regulations of fireworks because for some veterans with PTSD, it can trigger them.
Yeah, I think I heard that discussion and I hadn't thought of it from that angle. And of course, you know, tragically, that makes a lot of sense that it would be very difficult for them. Do you know what? You know, while my opinion isn't as profound as the effect on dogs and veterans, I find it really annoying. Do you know, I mean, maybe it's acceptable on a night like this around the bonfire season, right? I think you kind of have to be a reasonable citizen and accept that lots of other people enjoy this. But do you know what? When people let fireworks off randomly because it's their birthday or, you know, their cat's bar mitzvah or whatever it is...
Like at a pro-Palestine march by the looks of the bulletins.
I'm just like, you know, will you shut up? And I also think maybe we shouldn't ban it altogether, but maybe ban it after 10 p.m, setting off fireworks, because it can wake you up, it can be, you know, highly disruptive.
As if you're in bed at 10 o'clock.
I'm just cozied up after his bath.
Well, at least it's my own bed.
I can't believe we're having a conversation on GB News about a great British tradition, Guy Fawkes Night, from someone that tried to blow up the House of Parliament, and we're saying, oh, let's ban fireworks.
The only true patriot.
This is a great British tradition. It is a story from the past about someone that tried to blow up our democracy, our place of democracy now, and it deserves its place, and we should be celebrating it more.
Why do 80% of us
I was shocked.
You normally listen to the great
believe-
British public.
I could not believe these statistics. The great British public have let me down this time with their polling. Look, I think you're totally wrong on this. I think everyone's just got to, you know, grow up a little bit and accept that for a couple of days of the year, New Year's Eve, Diwali, Guy Fawkes Night, we have fireworks. You can only actually buy fireworks, by the way, in the lead-up to Guy Fawkes Night, a little bit afterwards, and also in the lead-up to
how
New
do
Year's
they
Eve.
get them the rest of the year?
There's already a lot of regulation
Online,
on
no?
fireworks.
Online.
watching this show. I actually really like Bonfire Night. You know, my nana used to put together our display in the small area that I grew up in County Durham, and it brought everyone together. And I think that was a really important history lesson as well, to learn about those horrible people in Parliament. But anyway.
Well, this week marked the King's first visit to a Commonwealth country as monarch. So during his 4-day state visit to Kenya, the King addressed what he called abhorrent and unjustifiable acts of violence committed against the Kenyans. Kenya's Prime President praised the King's exemplary courage in shedding light on uncomfortable truths, but others expressed their disappointment at the lack of formal apology. Benjamin, should the King have made a formal apology?
Well, the truth is that it's not an option that he has, because the UK government would have to set out that statement. We already paid, I think, £10 million, or £20 million, pardon me, to Kenya about 10 years ago. But it explicitly was not an apology. It was to the victims of an atrocity that Britain carried out in, what was it, the 60s? And so we've done that. I think that, you know, Britain would be a stronger country, a more respectable country on the global stage if it did apologise. You know, we did those things. We shouldn't shy away from taking accountability. Well, we as Britain did. We benefit from hundreds of years.
But we sat here alive
behaviours.
today. King Charles wasn't on horseback marching in, was he?
Hold on, the British Empire actually lost money running the empire. It was a moral crusade to stop things like bride burning and the decommission of the slave trade, which is happening in African nations with their neighbouring Africans. So, no, we haven't benefited from hundreds of years of colonialism.
Connor,
the world has benefited from us.
Mate, if you'll believe that, then I've got a chocolate teapot to sell you. I don't think the India company, what was it called?
East Indian
Company. That was a business that slaughtered an enormous number of people in India. It didn't do that because it was bothered about the cultural traditions in parts of India, did it? It did it to make a fortune.
Actually, Parliament was concerned about the cultural traditions of India, and they were concerned about the global slave trade.
I think it's a little bit ridiculous to say that the UK, the British Empire rather, benefited all of these colonial subjects. There were good things the Empire did, there were lots of bad things the Empire did. That's not something which is contested. The argument that we're having today is whether or not King Charles needs to apologise for things which happened back in the 50s or 60s, I believe. Now, the Mau Mau uprising was a terrible thing. I was actually speaking to a Kenyan whose mother remembers what happened during that period. People put into concentration camps, wives separated from their husbands. We did some terrible things in just a generation ago. So it's important that we acknowledge that, but whether or not I think we need to be apologising for it now, when no one really is responsible for that anymore, I think that's wrong. We paid the reparations back in 2013. Let's move on and talk about the future.
I also wonder, OK, if we make an apology is that enough? Will that stop, you know, the constant calls for more apologies and reparations?
I'd give an example of
all of this. I think it's difficult.
Of when someone has been murdered or a similar appalling crime happens. One of the things that a judge will look out for, often that the victim's family will look out for, is for the perpetrator to show remorse. That's something that means a lot. And I'd suggest that, given this is recent enough that it was in Charles's lifetime, that people, the offspring and the people that were around at the time are still alive, I think an apology would go.
Well, hang on then, because in Iraq, your mate Tony Blair had a lot to do there. Should the Iraqis be given compensation and an apology by His Majesty the King?
No, because what we did in Iraq was take out one of the most evil dictators that the world could know.
Moral crusade, right, that's interesting.
Well, yeah, I just think this gets us on a really, really dark trajectory where it just never ends.
Yeah, it's different from, you know, asking the perpetrator to apologise for a crime in a witness box or in court, because it's not the actual perpetrator that's saying sorry, is it? It's the whole country. If the monarch says sorry for something, he's apologising on behalf of Britain.
The nation, yeah.
And that's why it's so controversial.
Now, this week, folks, a Ukrainian military intelligence spokesman said a report on the alleged death of the Russian leader was a strategy to test Putin's domestic popularity. Now, the claim about his death still gained worldwide media coverage, forcing a Kremlin spokesman to deny it. Emily, what do you do to test your popularity?
Well, I certainly wouldn't pretend to be dead.
Well, I hope not.
That's for sure. There was a story, do you remember, a little while back, about someone who posted a video. It was a stunt of her dad dying or something and then didn't tell the family for a week. Anyway, I think we discussed it maybe on this show.
Yes.
You've got the memory of a gnat.
I have, yeah.
Anyway, what I would do to test my popularity is host a party and see if anyone turns up, Darren.
Well, Benjamin, I can see you being a sort of Shannon Matthews type, hiding under the bed. National media attention.
Well, you know,
what lengths would you go to?
I shy away from attention. You'll know that after 2 years on this channel. But, you know, what I'm sick of, actually, and it's kind of what Emily just said, is you get these social media influencers, which is a flattering way to describe these people, and so many times you've seen people say that an influencer has died. They haven't died, they just wanted the attention of it. I think we've got into a pretty ugly... I think we've got into a self-centred society where people are obsessed with testing their popularity and how much attention they can get.
Do you know what this story actually reminds me of? Basically, when my sister and I were toddlers and we all used to have baths together, I remember one time specifically I pretended to die in the bath, and my youngest sister, who must have been about 3 at the time, literally would burst into tears every single time I pretended to die. And I do it over and over again just for attention. So I find it absolutely hilarious that a grown man like Putin is getting media organisations to do the same game that I used to... the same prank, rather, that I used to play on my sister in the bath when we were toddlers.
Could he be dead?
Well, I hope so.
I think, honestly, you look at Putin's face, the only way to kill Putin off would be to put something in his Botox filler. That'd get rid of him.
Yeah. I mean, Connor, what would you do? What lengths would you go to?
I would take leaves probably out the 2006 YouTube pranksters, where they just paid people off to chase them down the street or say, oh, gone wrong, and things like... I mean, this is part of the trend that you see on social media now, of where we've just had Mizzy earlier last year committing weird home invasions and assaulting people on the street. Exactly, just for attention. And then we recently had...
on social media anymore.
Well, thank God for that. And we recently had the Palestinian protester who decided to get a bunch of mice in a box and chuck it in McDonald's on TikTok. That was just for clickbait.
Yes,
so
that's true.
People are losing their minds just for online attention.
But I love the new burgers.
Well, something a bit different for our fifth story. The saga of Britain's loneliest sheep has been resolved after the Scottish Society for Prevention of Cruelty to Animals called off their rescue attempt. A team of volunteers stepped in. One of the team said, we've named her Fiona. She's now safe and well and heading to a well-known Scottish farm park. Darren, this is heartwarming, isn't it?
Well, I thought it was heartwarming until Benjamin told the group that actually he's wearing Fiona today.
Have you spent all day thinking about that?
But I did think... my heart broke when I read the story of someone was paddling round 2 years before seeing the same sheep at the same spot and assuming that the sheep would be able to get its way back up the mountain or what hill or whatever it is. And I just thought, that actually it made me realise I do actually have a heart.
It's warmed your ice-cold heart.
It has, yeah.
Just thank God it wasn't in a tent.
But,
well, you're the one wearing it.
The British public really show how much they care about animals when a story like this comes along. I think there were 50,000 people signed a petition to bring her home and to save her. But then some people were saying that actually she might like it there.
I don't know. If I was a sheep, I think I would probably be a lone sheep on a mountain somewhere, just like nice and high up, looking down on everyone else.
So say something about your personality, Almy.
I don't know.
Looking down your nose.
You're learning a lot, folks. You're learning a lot.
I can just see this sheep having a great time. Maybe now it's having an awful time with all the other sheep. It's got to, kind of contest the hay and space and water.
No, apparently the sheep cried out for attention when she was going by in her little boat again.
Right.
Yeah, so
like
it was desperate.
Could it have been a cry of happiness?
Well, I don't think so. Apparently it sounded more like a bleating sort of, please help.
Isn't that just how sheep sound?
I mean, I don't think she speaks sheep, but, I don't know what the crack was there.
I think it's rather a nice story.
I do too.
And hopefully the sheep will make some friends and isn't a loner like Almy and doesn't want to just be away from everyone.
A lone sheep away from everyone up on my hill.
Right, well, anyway, I'm sure viewers and listeners at home are happy that the sheep has come to safety and maybe we'll have some friends. But still to come tonight, we will ask whether Marks and Spencer are ruining Christmas.
Yes.
Or is it all a storm in your eggnog?
No.
In Darren's eggnog. Plus, we'll answer all your questions in Flummox the 5. But next, do asexuals need more rights, or is this a minority group too far? You're with Saturday 5, live on GB News.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. Join me, Mark Dolan, Fridays and Saturdays from 9, Sundays from 10. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
There's only 3 people you can trust in life. Your doctor, your lawyer, and your nana.
I'm not sure.
So join me, Nana Aquare, at 3 p.m. every Saturday and Sunday, where we discuss the biggest topics of the weekend. Be ready for battle. Could you be quiet? What is this?
It's my new
It's
teeth.
your new teeth. I don't bite. Well, not without a good reason. Always honest, always fun. Every weekend at 3 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes & Co, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News,
the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Who is it? We're here for the show.
More energy this time!
Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie.
Second best.
You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like? I was terrified.
I'm playing strip poker with these 3.
Ah!
No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays at 9 on GB News.
Welcome back to the Saturday 5. Cheers very much for your company and for your emails about tonight's topics. Now, we've got our first ever email from an animal, and it isn't Fiona the sheep. This one's from Alfie the Cavapoo, and he says, let's have a look. Please ban fireworks, they terrify me. Oh, poor
This is
Alfie.
the problem, they are terrifying for
They
dogs.
are.
I remember my Bob, who was not a Cavapoo, but a Cockapoo. You're cowering.
Oh, God bless him.
Shivering.
God bless Bob. Ellen's written in and she says, the lonely sheep being saved has saved my day. Well, Ellen, until Benjamin got his greasy little mitts on her, that's all I can say. Now, though, it's time for our first guest tonight.
Yes, so this is the big question that everyone is asking. Do asexuals need more representation? That is the basis of a report which was unveiled last week called ACE in the UK. It was published to mark the end of Asexual Awareness Week, yes, me neither, and launched by model Yasmin Benoit. There were a series of complaints listed in the report, with some people claiming they did not feel able to come out as asexual. Asexual.
Sean Connery.
At work, while others protested the fact that asexuality is not recognised as a sexual orientation. I'm not sure I've ever said sexual so much. However, do these asexual complainants have a genuine grievance, or is this yet another group searching for a victimhood? Journalist and women's rights campaigner Jo Bartosz has been writing about this topic, and she joins us now. Albie, take it away.
Hello, Jo. Thank you so much for joining us. So maybe you can begin by telling us what asexuality actually is.
Well, I mean, I think it's fairly legitimate to say that some people have a low sex drive, and sometimes there's a medical reason for that. When it comes to asexuality in this particular campaign, I think essentially it's Stonewall looking for a new form of income, a new stream of income, a new group to represent. And to be honest, I think it's a lot of narcissistic posers.
And what is it that these asexuality activists are actually calling for? What does this Stonewall report actually tell us?
Well, I mean, it's interesting, isn't it? Because they haven't been able to articulate which rights exactly it is that they're lacking. I think one thing that is notable from the report is that it does seem to be very much a youth-focused movement, if you like. So it's quite noticeable that a lot of those who are calling themselves asexual are very much younger. And I think that's probably a result of being brought up in a society where pornography is so normalised. So I think they think if you don't want to have sex all the time, then clearly you're a special group of people that need special protections. Some of them complained about not being able to come out as asexual at work, but then to be honest, who bloody hell does talk about sex at work? Others complained about not being or not having their issues considered properly by medical professionals, and at the minute they mentioned they had a low sex drive or they were asexual, that was seen as something that needed to be addressed. But the fact is, it could be something that needs to be addressed. So another thing, for example, is that we know that certain antidepressants and anti-anxiety medications can have a really powerful effect on libido. It can really lower libido. So I think actually, if we are seeing sort of a massive increase in people identifying as asexual, it could well be that it's due to their medication, because so many more people are now on sort of prescription medications. And of course,
one of the complaints that I saw in the report when I was reading it, I couldn't quite believe my eyes at some of the things, but one of the complaints was that asexuals feel that other LGBT people don't accept them and they just think they're straight people trying to be special. Are those LGBT people right?
Yeah, of course they are. I mean, of course they're straight people trying to be special. I mean, or even if they're not straight people trying to be special, they're just, yeah. I mean, who the hell cares if somebody's having sex or not? It's really not a special identity. I mean, I think most middle-aged married people probably feel a little bit asexual. You know, it's not everybody wants sex all the time. That doesn't make you a special type of person. That makes you kind of normal.
Joe Bartosz, thank you so much for joining us this evening to talk us through the Ace in the UK report from Stonewall earlier on this week. So, Benjamin, I know you're not asexual, but what do you make of this asexual rights movement? Do they need to be protected by the Equality Act?
Yeah, not getting laid and being asexual aren't the same thing. Look, I mean, it's a matter of science, and has been for some time, that asexuality is a real thing, that there are people who do not have a sex drive at all, and that's how they've been designed as a person.
Oh, so he likes the science now.
Not a consequence.
2 minutes ago, you didn't know what a woman was.
You know, you're just the same record every week, aren't you, Darren? You know, and
does that need to be protected in the Equality Act?
Well, the fact is that makes people feel very ostracised. It makes them feel outside the norms of society.
Benjamin, you're pushing it even for you. You don't believe this. Come on, you must think it's absurd.
I do. And Yasmin Benoit, who...
No one cares if someone doesn't want to have sex.
Yasmin Benoit, the asexual model, we did the Oxford Union together. It was her and me versus Toby Young and Kristen Constantine.
About what?
About has woke culture gone too far? And asexual Yasmin and I said, no, we need more woke. So clearly she's a very wise person.
But Darren Grimes, rape is already illegal. What other legal protections do asexuals need?
Well, they don't. They just want attention. That's all this is. I'm so sick of all of this stuff. I mean, you both said, Benjamin and Albie at the start, that, you know, the culture wars are a distraction from everybody else. Well, having a discussion for 15 minutes on someone not wanting to have a shag isn't my idea of actually talking about the things that matter, to be perfectly honest.
You know what the most hysterical thing that I saw on social media about this was a young lady claiming to be asexual. I think she was on a march about it, and she was dressed in BDSM clothes.
Yeah, but you can like to dress that way and feel empowered without wanting to do the act.
What it is, it's an attention signal and it's a deliberate provocation. And something that came up in what you said was, OK, what discrimination they're facing? Well, they feel. Right, OK, so this community is a consequence of us being too abundant. You wouldn't have been able to locate them before social media because they don't exist in a time and place. What they want is a positive right to your recognition.
Well, do you know what? Pound shop Jordan Peterson might think like that. I think we should stand up for asexuals.
Right, well, there's Pound Shop Stonewall, but still ahead. We'll answer all of your questions in Flummox the 5. But next, Marks and Spencer's have released a Christmas advert, which, well, doesn't have much to do with Christmas, to be honest. Harmless fun or a festive farce? We'll discuss that next. You're with the Saturday 5, live on GB News.
Who is it? We're here for the show.
More energy this time!
Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie, second best. You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like? I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these three.
Oh! No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays at 9 on GB News.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you. Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months. That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
Delicious.
mental?
Open your mouth. OK, here comes a train. Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa!
Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows,
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. Join me, Mark Dolan, Fridays and Saturdays from 9, Sundays from 10. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good evening, welcome back to the Saturday 5. Thank you very much for your emails. I've got time for one. Sue says, I love the visual splendour of fireworks, but appreciate that the sound causes great terror for some animals and some people. Why not encourage more wonderful light laser shows? It seems that the sounds are the big problem, not the visual display. Yes, I've seen some amazing ones, actually, in Dubai. We were talking about Dubai last week on this show because Ben Leo fancied moving there. But, yeah, they have incredible light displays. I think there's something about fireworks there, isn't there?
I've seen amazing ones at Disneyland, but when it's, you know, Derek in Burnley in his back garden, really not the same, is it?
What's Derek ever done to you?
Right, folks, next I want to talk to you about Merry Thismas. Yeah, that's right, not Christmas, because that's what M&S have said in their festive ad. It's Christmas and it matters to us. What a tone-deaf move from such a British favourite. Let's have a look.
But I won't do that.
No, I won't do that. I would do anything for love, anything you've been dreaming of, but I just won't do that. No, no, I just won't do that.
This Christmas, do only what you love.
Yeah, so you missed the Merry Thismas bit there, but honestly, I think actually the chief officers of M&S that signed off on that must have been on the eggnog early. But to joining me to discuss this is the trade unionist and author Paul Embry. Paul, is criticism of the advert justified, or am I being a miserable sod?
No, I'm with you on this one, Darren. I think the whole thing was extremely ill-judged and frankly pretty stupid. I just think, look, Christmas in this day and age, this fast-moving world, we're a very kind of atomized, fragmented society, and Christmas is one of those few events that at least has the capacity to bring people together, to unite us. And it seemed to me that this advert was peddling a message that was very kind of anti-that, very anti-Christmas, basically saying, look, we all know that Christmas is a pain in the backside. And we all know you don't really enjoy it, and you should just go out and do your own thing and be selfish and be very individualistic about it. And I just kind of think, what were they thinking? Because whoever decided to market this, I think, has alienated a large part of their own core base at Marks and Spencer, and maybe they'll pay a price for it. Who knows?
Absolutely, because I mean, I don't have the statistics, but I imagine if you were to poll Marks and Spencer customers, the vast majority of them would be small c conservatives who absolutely find calling Christmas Thismas and actually talking about the sense of self and the individual being more important than the us and the shared endeavour of Christmas actually utterly appalling.
Yeah, but what we have to remember is that marketing departments and advertising departments are largely run by a particular cohort of people. They tend to be fairly young, 20 or 30 somethings. They tend to be graduates. They tend to be very kind of progressive in their views, hyper-liberal in their views, and they generally, and I'm trying not to stereotype here, but generally they tend to be very kind of anti anything that smacks of tradition or religion or cultural mores or custom and that kind of thing. So to them, peddling a campaign like this probably didn't really mean much because it chimes with their worldview. Although, interestingly, I doubt very much they would have commissioned the same campaign in respects of a festival for any other religion. Can you imagine Marks and Spencer's commissioning an advert over Eid, for example, or Diwali? And within that advert, essentially mocking the tradition of that particular festival and setting light to the decorations. They would not do it. We all know they wouldn't do it. But of course, Christianity is fair game, isn't it? It always comes in for a kick-in by these kind of people with a progressive worldview. So I can't say I'm terribly surprised by it. I just think it was stupid and ill-judged.
Just finally then, Paul, whilst I've got you, I mean, you're used to fighting fires. M&S are going to be fighting quite the fire over this one. Do you actually think the calls for a boycott are justified?
Well, I think that if people are put out enough by it, then they're quite justified in saying, look, I don't want Marks and Spencer to have my custom, because sooner or later, I think some of these companies who peddle these kind of woke campaigns the whole time, not because they believe in them, but just because they want to flaunt their progressive credentials, they don't really care about what people think until their profits are hit, until they're hit in the pocket. Yes. And we saw it with Bud Light, didn't we? All of a sudden they think, oh, we better not do that again. So if people are inclined to do that, I wouldn't criticise them for it.
I mean, go woke, go broke, Paul. I mean, I had my Christmas food order. I was hovering the mouse over. But Paul Embry, thank you.
You've eaten enough.
Thank you very much for your time, Paul. Right, panel. Benjamin Butterworth, after that very rude comment, I am...
What did he say?
He said, I'm fat enough.
The turkey's ready.
Thismas, you must be a fan of Thismas. You're a they, them, aren't you?
Where did we find you? Look, you know what, first of all, I'm just glad that we live in a country that is sufficiently stable we can get bothered about this, to be honest. The real message of that M&S advert is that you don't need to go and, you know, get dolled up and spend all the effort
They
on...
were all dolled up.
Yeah, but it's about saying you can just be with your family, you can just enjoy the love and the pleasure of Christmas. It was only
Christmas.
There was no family.
Throwing an elf off a roof.
But look, do you know what? I find it hilarious the way people get wound up about this stuff. You know, the original controversy about this advert was that there were paper hats thrown in a fire that were red, green and white, the colours of the Palestinian flag. And M&S issued a formal public apology saying, just to be clear, we weren't burning the Palestinian flag. So I think that shows how ridiculous some of the discourse
but this argument isn't ridiculous. Paul is right.
May I just say, there didn't appear to be any family. This was more seemed to be about singletons.
Yes, it
this
did.
advert about having your alternative Christmas where you don't have to care about family. But I'm sorry, but for those who can afford to get their Christmas shop from M&S, it's likely that you're going to be having... Most people still do have some kind of traditional family Christmas, so it seems odd to want to mess with that.
I don't know if
and make it seem so atomistic.
Oh, big word from you today, Emily, and your fractions earlier on. Very impressive. But I find it difficult to get annoyed about this, and I wonder if this is an example of a media bubble story where we're all getting quite annoyed about it. But Emily's quite right. People that shop at M&S, what percentage of the population will be buying their Christmas stuff from M&S? If you really hate it that much, you can all switch to Waitrose. But everyone else at home probably doesn't really care that much about this stuff, and they're worried about whether or not they can afford their Christmas turkey.
You see, I don't agree with that, because, Connor, do you agree with me that quite a lot of people really value Christmas and they value the togetherness that Christmas brings them, that one time a year where you get together round that table with a turkey and you are as one. You are united with your family, with your nation, whatever else it might be. And actually what Marks and Spencer have done here is actually alienate their key shopper, essentially.
Yeah, well, particularly because the families that people value at this time so lovingly are not depicted in that ad at all. And I'm glad you brought up the Palestinian hats, because as Paul said on there, they issued an apology to who? The potential Muslims who might have been insulted by this because they were afraid of the backlash. They weren't worried about the Christians who felt denigrated by saying we should destroy the things associated with your tradition.
That's a good... I have to be honest.
And hold on, 1 minute, hold on. There's a reason why I don't think this is just a media bubble story, and that is if we neglect our traditions and we neglect the heritage of the country that allows us to defend our values, when times of crisis come and our values are under question, how do we defend them if we haven't been present?
Look, the only people that were thinking those coloured hats were about the Palestinian flag were just idiots to get round up by that. As if M&S, you know, the advert was filmed in August. Unless M&S is run by a combination of Hamas and Mystic Meg, they didn't know about what was going to happen.
They were still afraid about who would be offended, but they weren't afraid enough of the Christians retaliating.
The whole idea of Christmas...
That's just one flaw in my argument.
The whole idea of Christmas in December, it's all marketing. It was to get pagans to convert to Christianity. Christ wasn't even born in December. The whole idea of Christmas as we celebrate it now, it's all marketing.
It's not just all marketing. No. It's been a tradition for hundreds of years and people value it. And so M&S did not show the due respect to people who see Christmas as a time of family and faith.
Do you know what the most annoying thing about the advert was? Well, the whole saga, I mean, is that M&S apologised.
Yeah.
Right.
Pathetic.
OK, folks, still ahead. Don't forget the brilliant Mark Dolan is going to be here at 9 p.m. But before that, we asked for your questions and we're about to answer them. It's almost time for Flummox the 5. Get ready. You're with the Saturday 5 live on GB News.
Who is it? We're here for the show.
More energy this time!
Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie. Second best. You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified.
I'm playing strip poker with these three.
Oh! No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays at 9 on GB News.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you. Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months. That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
On Mark Dolan tonight, in My Big Opinion, Gary Lineker strikes again, backing a protest march on Armistice Day. It's time someone showed this ex-footballer the red card. In My Take at 10, the row rages on over Marks & Spencer's Christmas advert, which cancels Christmas altogether. And my Mark Meets guest is Evie Toombs, who, despite needing 24 hours a day care for spina bifida, has reached the top of show jumping. We're live from 9.
Oh, welcome back to the Saturday Five. We've had another email from a furry friend, and Emily's going to read this one.
OK, I will do. My name is Kai. I'm a gun dog, and I couldn't give a toss about fireworks language. Give me the noise of a shotgun any day. Oh, well, there you go. Punchy dog there, Kai.
Ah, yes.
I like the sound of Kai.
Yes.
He's not cowering in the corner.
No, he's not.
Under
He's
the
not.
bed, or, you know, I once found my dog, well, under the sofa, of course, under the bed, but sometimes, you know, he finds the most obscure places to hide from the fireworks. Terrified.
Oh, poor thing, though.
I know no one probably cares about my dog, but there you go.
Right.
An experience that many share.
It's Flummox the Five now, where you wonderful viewers set the agenda. Cheers very much for sending in all your questions for us.
Yes, so we have this one from Linda first. Linda says, when AI eradicates all jobs, will we have a government? Well, I hope not, Linda. What do you reckon, Darren?
You hope we don't have a government.
Well, not one as useless as the successive ones.
Oh, this one.
I mean, I would prefer, you know, a human government than a robot.
I was going to say, you want some robot overlord.
That's true libertarianism.
Yeah. I mean, I think we will still have a government, yes, but I can't imagine that there's going to be much in the way of employment, is there?
So they'll be the only ones.
Or am I a
jobs?
Luddite?
I mean, some right-wingers would say that there'll always be government jobs. That's one thing that never goes anywhere.
True, yes.
Look, I actually think when people, I know that Elon Musk said at the conference earlier this week in the UK that, you know, it could undermine human existence because we won't have a purpose. But actually, I think you could have said that when computers were mainstreaming in the 80s and 90s. You could have said that when cars replaced
raced horses in the early 20th century. The truth is that employment is much higher now than it was 100 years ago, and we've got a lot of technology. So I don't think we should be afraid.
Well, you're just worried that there's not going to be a space for gobby left-wingers.
No robot could replace me.
I think we should be worried about the governing structure that goes into AI. The Biden administration put out an AI Bill of Rights a little while ago, and they said that we shouldn't put malinformation into the AI algorithms. Malinformation is correct facts shared outside their appropriate context.
Well, hang on, Connor, now robots have rights.
I thought you were about to say they're asexual or something like that.
Well, the robot actually has a right to us, it turns out, because in the bill as well it said that if you're dealing with an algorithm, you have a right to a person assigned to that algorithm. So the legal framework gives robots us as pets.
So we should not have regulation for AI?
I'm not saying we shouldn't have a regulation for it. I'm saying the current regulation is mental and it will render humans obsolete.
I mean, I'll become the revolution in Sir Keir Starmer in number 10. We are going to have a robot in charge, aren't we?
Well, I don't know about that, and we don't know that Keir Starmer is going to be in number 10. Perhaps the Conservatives can pull it out of the bag. It's a possibility. We don't know what's going to happen.
Next up, folks, we've got Freddie, and Freddie's written in. He says, let's see how good your basic maths skills are. What is the second perfect number? Good luck. Oh, I feel like that's a very dismissive
Emily, you
good
must
luck.
know.
Come on, Emily, you're good at this. What's the perfect number?
Number 2.
Is it number 7?
Is it 9?
Don't look at me, I'm borderline dyscalcular.
I don't know.
5.
Oh, apparently the answer was 28, so we were all
I
wrong.
knew that.
Why is it a perfect number? Do we know?
We'll never know.
I don't know. We'll find out. I will find out.
Can you let us know for
Right.
next week?
Next up.
Yes, from Jenny. Labour have accused Rishi Sunak of angling for a job after his Elon Musk interview. Was he just setting himself up for a future career? Well, Jenny, I think you might be onto something there, because the way Rishi Sunak was giggling at Elon Musk and his body language did look like he might fancy a job in Silicon Valley, eh?
No, Rishi Sunak's going to be Prime Minister for the next 10 years.
OK.
I blooming hope not. Really.
I actually think this was a diplomatic coup for the country to get all of those important people around a table, all the nations of the world coming round here, Elon Musk, the richest man in the world, to come to Britain and actually discuss the technology that is going to influence absolutely every part of our life. I think actually there's reason to be proud of Britain in that moment.
Perhaps cynical.
I think you're pretty naive. I mean, look, the bloke knows that he's going to be out of office in about a year's time. We also know, because it came out while he was applying for the job of Tory leader, that he had his green card to keep his citizenship status available in the US. Now, if he wasn't looking for a Silicon Valley job, for a, big bucks job in the US, then why would he have done that?
It is like what Nick Clegg did. Immediately after he leaves office, he becomes Chief of Global Operations at Facebook. It's very lucrative being on the inside and then on the outside.
Or Helle Thorning-Schmidt, the former Prime Minister of Denmark, she did the same route. I think it's very likely that's what Rishi Sunak sees himself doing.
Well, this is the thing. Big robot will
it's
have a
gonna
lot
be
of
massive.
power over regulation.
It is,
and
it
how
is.
It's
It's going to be a real conundrum. Right, our next question, Dom has written in, and Dom says, according to the European Social Survey, the majority of Brits now hold positive views on the impact of immigration. What are your positive views on immigration? Well, Emily, what are your positive views on immigration?
Well, my grandmother was German.
Ah, yes, of course.
So that's positive. I wouldn't be here were it not for my grandmother meeting an Englishman.
Connor, what are your
So there you
positive
go.
views? The French did an all right job after 1066, I guess.
Yeah, they helped us set the country up. I don't really have many, given the rate of immigration and the social problems that it's causing at the moment. And I would also...
What about your friendship with me?
I don't really have many, unfortunately. I would also question who they're polling, how many and whatnot, because as we've seen with the last 10 years of government voting, every manifesto pledge has been to lower immigration. The British public seem to have wanted that.
Right, next from Callum. Callum's emailed in, question for all of the 5. Would they ever like to host the Saturday 5 in a pub and take questions from a live audience? I would absolutely love that, Callum. I once went on the road with Michelle Dewberry and it was a lot of fun.
I absolutely would. I'd be well up for that because I always like a drink, but there we are. Thank you very much, Callum. Now, Benjamin, would you do that?
I mean, I need to drink to get through working with you as it is, so at least I'll have an excuse in a pub.
Albie?
I think it's a brilliant idea. Let's do it.
All right, let's do it. All right, producers, are you listening? Get your bank books out. Right, thanks to our guests tonight, the brilliant Connor Tomlinson.
Thank you very much.
Now, next up, folks, it's the equally wonderful Mark Dolan. And I'll leave you all with this regarding perfect numbers. In number theory, a perfect number is a positive integer.
Oh dear, get back to school,
That is equal to the sum of its positive divisors, excluding the number itself.
Words and numbers were a problem.
I failed maths at school.
Oh, really?
So, yes.
Oh, there's a shot.
So, fortunately, you're all keeping me in a job here watching this, so thank you very much. Kind Samaritans, just like Suella Braverman. I'll see you all next week. Cheers for your company.
Hello there, good evening. I'm Jonathan Vautry here with your GB News weather forecast provided by the Met Office. Slight mixed picture for those of us stepping out for fireworks shows over the next couple of days, particularly tonight. There will be some heavy showers across parts of southeast England, maybe with some rumbles of thunder. Outbreaks of rain also for northern central England into parts of Wales. Quite a lot of mist and murk developing also. Driest conditions generally for Northern Ireland and Scotland underneath some clearer skies. Some fog developing here as well, but underneath those clearer skies, temperatures dropping off down into the low single figures for some rural spots, just holding up a touch more underneath the cloud across England and Wales. That will take some time to clear its way off into Sunday, slowly drifting over towards the North Sea, and then into the afternoon we'll see showers pushing their way into coastal western districts of Wales, England, Scotland and Northern Ireland. Generally, the further east you are, rule of thumb, more likely you are to stay drier into the day, but might still see few showers pushing into the Midlands down into southeast England as well. Temperatures ranging between 10 and 14 degrees Celsius. As we said, into the new working week, low pressure sits itself to the northeast of the UK, so we start feeding in this northwesterly feed of air quite persistently. So once again on Monday, showers will be most frequent across the west, could be heavy at times, maybe with some rumbles of thunder and hail also. Still quite breezy for many of us, but once again, eastern areas seeing largely dry conditions with prolonged amounts of sunshine. Temperatures generally around average for the time of year. Showery theme continues into Tuesday, but more persistent rain arrives to Wednesday. Enjoy your evening. Bye-bye.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. Join me, Mark Dolan, Fridays and Saturdays from 9, Sundays from 10. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
There's only 3 people you can trust in life. Your doctor, your lawyer, and your nana.
I'm not sure.
So join me, Nana Aquare, at 3 p.m. every Saturday and Sunday, where we discuss the biggest topics of the weekend. Be ready for battle.
Could you be quiet? What is this? It's my new
It's
teeth.
your new teeth. I don't bite. Well, not without a good reason. Always honest, always fun. Every weekend at 3 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes & Co, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening. GB News.